It is with great honor and reverence that I now request our next speaker, His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrit Swami, to address us. A little bit about him. Bhakti Rasamrit Swami is a sannyasi in the ISKCON tradition, and he preaches the eternal message of Sanatan Dharma all over the world. He is presently one of the trustees of ISKCON India. As a young man, he completed his Bachelor of Engineering and MBA and worked in DSP Merrill Lynch, which we have been hearing about, and also Standard Chartered in management positions. However, being deeply inspired by the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, he decided to leave all this and dedicate his life to propagate the timeless wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam. Then in 2010, he was awarded the Order of Sannyas, or Renunciation, in ISKCON, with the title of His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrit Swami. Today, he is actively involved, as Gaurang Prabhu also mentioned, in various projects and in the development of a self-sufficient Vedic eco-village 40 kilometers from Belgaum called Gokul Dham, spread over 450 acres of lush, dense forest. And apart from regularly lecturing at a wide variety of forums in India and abroad, he guides aspirants on the practical application of Vedic wisdom in day-to-day life. So perhaps he's the perfect person to us today to instruct us, to give us his learnings, sharings on how we can implement Vedic wisdom in our lives. Over to His Holiness, Bhakti Rasamrit Maharaj.
I am extremely honored to come again to an Artha Forum program. I have been coming to these programs for some years now, and it has always been a pleasure to interact not only with the speakers, but also with the audience. And I share that same sentiment this evening as I sit amongst all of you. And I start with a reservation and maybe some kind of an allegation that I think probably the previous speakers and the moderator must have seen a part of my speech. Many of the things they said, of course, I share with them. It was very nice to hear some wonderful points made earlier, and especially Amit making the point about compassionate capitalism. Very interesting phrase. I think something that is in short supply these days. I was asked to speak on the topic Dharma in Business. I flew down this morning to Bombay this afternoon. And as I was sitting in the flight, just a few seats ahead of me on my left, there was one gentleman reading a newspaper. I didn't know which newspaper it was. And the headlines on that particular page were, it was an interview with somebody who I didn't recognize. It had a small picture there. And the heading said, we should know the desires of our customers if we want to succeed in our business. And I started thinking about it. Well, naturally, it makes sound sense. Because if you know your customers well, you can treat them well, they remain loyal to you, and the customer base grows. Yes. But then as I was thinking further, I felt that there was also another angle to this, and especially in connection with the topic for today. It reminded me of a friend who used to run a pure vegetarian restaurant some years ago. He was doing reasonably well, and he had a loyal customer base. And one day he came to me, and in the course of the conversation, he started saying that, many of my customers have now asked me to open a bar within the restaurant, a permit room and a bar. So should I do it? I said, well, you know my answer. What do you think? He said, that's what I'm confused about, because if I open a bar, then there's going to be so much business and I'll make so much money. So I said, you have to think about your dharma. It's up to you. What is your dharma? Do you want to sell alcohol? I don't drink, but you're selling. So is that your dharma? He said, well, actually, no. But you see, I have another dharma. And that dharma is that I have to maintain my family. That's my grihastha dharma, my householder's dharma. So does that mean that there's a conflict between the two dharmas? In a sense, yes, but not really, if you really look deep into it. I asked him, you've been doing very well in your business, reasonably well. Is there any need for you to transgress other dharmic laws in order to fulfill this dharmic responsibility of looking after your family? Are you really so hard up for money? Are you really in such dire straits that your family will not have food to eat unless you sell alcohol? He laughed and said, of course not. So I said, the answer is clear. So the point is that there are ethical issues involved in all aspects of our life. So why should business be exempt from this? In the 1970s, there was a famous Nobel laureate in economics, Milton Friedman. He was one of the leading economists of that era. And he was a proponent of the free market theory. And he had this famous quote in which he said, the responsibility of a business is to keep making profits, provided it plays by the rules of the game. And then that unleashed a whole movement, so to speak, of free market entrepreneurship. And eventually it reached a crescendo, which was followed by some devastating financial collapses, recessions, and various types of crises in the financial world. There was a movie that came out in the 1980s. It was called The Wall Street. And the protagonist of this movie, he makes these statements which became iconic statements for many of that generation, those who were upwardly mobile and wanted to join the corporate world, to rise in the corporate ladder. And these statements were, he's actually in a board meeting of a particular company in which he has a very large stake as a shareholder. And in that board meeting, he makes a fiery speech and castigates the board members. And he tells them that actually none of you in the management have any significant stake. You're making millions of dollars, but you're not investing it in the company. You're taking it away somewhere else. And then after speaking at length, then he comes to his point, and he makes the famous statement, greed is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies. Greed is what has made possible the upward surge in mankind. So that was the age where greed was not just good, but greed was God also. So it was worshipped. And success in life was understood in terms of how much money you made, how far up the corporate ladder you were able to climb, and so on. So that brings the question that is really greed the course or the goal of the driving force behind business? Should that be the case? What is a business after all? A business is a venture that is meant to generate goods, services, and money to provide for the needs of the society. But is a business meant to cater to the greed of society? That is an ethical question those who are involved in business have to think about. It's one thing for us as consumers to not be afflicted by the mentality of intense greed, but it is equally important for those who are in the position of providing the goods and services to also reflect on this. Should they pander to the whims and the desires of people at large? So coming to that newspaper article which I was referring to in the earlier part of my talk, is it really the purpose or the dharma of a business to cater to every single desire? Was it the dharma of that owner of that vegetarian restaurant to bow down to the wishes and the desires of his clients or his customers and provide them alcohol because they wanted it? Did he have some sense of ethics or values, or did he have his dharma to which he had to answer? Now, these are questions that are very important. Is it greed or is it need? And what distinguishes the two? Where is that dividing line? Where is that Lakshman Rekha, so to speak? Actually speaking, business is one of the most essential activities in human society. But we have to distinguish between the entrepreneurial spirit and creation of wealth on one hand, and unbridled greed on the other hand, which causes so much devastation in the society. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi who said, there is enough in this world for everyone's need, but there's not enough in this world for even one man's greed. So what we are doing today in the name of capitalism is that we are fueling this greed. We are fanning the sparks of aspirational public everywhere. We want them to want more and more and more. Ye dil mange more. So we're in the kaun banega karodpati culture, that you're urged to just want more and more and more. And I sometimes joke that the deadliest disease that we have in the world is not HIV or TB or whatever, but the deadliest disease in the world is I want more and more and more, and it doesn't stop. It's in this kind of syndrome where we are trapped and never satisfied unless one breaks out of it, like we heard from Amit. It's a few rare souls who are able to break out of the trappings of this whole vicious cycle, and they break free from it. It's a very liberating influence. And then understand that there is something higher, there's something more in life. Actually, everyone who earns some money and becomes successful in life will sooner or later start thinking about this. The meaninglessness of it all, the futility of it all. I've made so much money, now what? I'm not going to be able to carry it away with me when I leave this world. It will be left behind for others to enjoy. So every thoughtful person, sooner or later, however successful he or she may be in business, will think about these things. As time goes on and one starts reflecting more seriously, one becomes philosophical. And one starts thinking about business in a philosophical way. Should greed be the driving force behind business? Should this unbridled aspirational mentality be the driving force behind it? So obviously it stands to reason that there is some strong moral, ethical foundation that is necessary for business, which must be its twin. When you divorce this moral foundation from business, then it will lead to disaster, as we have seen in the recent years. And this brings us to the idea of the concept of dharma. We've all heard the term. The term is very hard to define, but it's something about which we have an intuitive grasp. Dharma is a multi-layered thing. It's multi-dimensional, it's multifaceted. But being born in India, we have some idea. We've heard of this term dharma. The word dharma actually originates from the root word dhri, which means to hold, to sustain, to bear, to protect. And therefore, dharma is that one universal principle that underlies everything in this existence. Everything in our life, whether it is our personal life, whether it is social life, family life, professional life, political life, national life, is all, or rather should be, covered by dharma. Dharma is that one thing that upholds everything in life. So why not business? Why should business be an exception to this? There is a saying that comes to mind that's very interesting. Dharma eva hato hanti, dharmo rakshati rakshitaha. It's a Sanskrit saying, which means that if you destroy dharma, dharma will destroy you. But if you protect dharma, dharma will protect you. Of course, dharma cannot be destroyed. But what is meant by the phrase destroying dharma means that you don't follow dharma. There are certain universal laws of nature, of creation, the laws of God that need to be obeyed by everybody, by every thoughtful person. So if we knowingly, especially, prefer to not follow these laws, in that sense we are destroying dharma. And that dharma will then destroy us. On the other hand, dharmo rakshati rakshitaha. If we are protecting dharma, then dharma will protect us. So the principle applies to business as well. If our business is run according to principles of dharma, then dharma will protect our business. It will sustain. If we run our business not in accordance with the principles of dharma, but rather in accordance with the principles of adharma, then that adharma will destroy us. So protecting dharma and following dharma in business. If we want our business to sustain, it needs to be run on dharmic principles. What constitutes dharma? As I said earlier, it's a very complicated topic. But let's talk about something very simple. In the great scripture, the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is explained that dharma is embodied in the form of a bull. And interestingly, today we are honoring a family that has expressed its extreme commitment to the cause of the cows and the bulls. So I guess it's befitting that this analogy or this metaphor should come up this evening. So dharma is personified by a bull. And this bull has 4 legs. And the 4 legs represent the 4 pillars of dharma. And these 4 pillars must be protected by people across all sections of society. What are those 4 pillars? Tapaha, shaucham, daya, satyam. Tapaha means austerity, penance. Shaucham means cleanliness. Daya means mercy or compassion. And satyam means truthfulness. So these are the 4 pillars of dharma. What do we mean by tapa or austerity? Austerity in brief means that one does something voluntarily, even though it may be inconvenient, for a higher purpose. One accepts inconvenience voluntarily to achieve something sublime. That is austerity. And in business, it means that I don't always take the easy way out. I don't always take the path of least resistance. I don't always succumb to temptations, of which there will be plenty in the world of business, but rather, I prefer to do the right thing, even if it is more inconvenient. Simply because those are my values, that is my dharma. Coming back to the example of that gentleman who had that vegetarian restaurant, he finally took the decision to be satisfied with his level of profit and not go for a permit room or to not sell alcohol in his restaurant. So it is sometimes a difficult decision. It's a hard decision because the temptations can be sometimes very alluring. I also want to narrate an incident about another friend of mine who was also in the financial world. He had an associate who was very ambitious and very sharp in the business field, in the finance field. One day, this person thought of a scheme or a series of schemes in the financial world by which he could become wealthy very quick and he could earn a great deal of money. So he approached this friend of mine and he made this proposal. And the friend was just on the path of spirituality. He was just beginning his journey of spirituality in a serious way. But here comes this huge temptation to earn a large amount of money. And in those days, I'm speaking of the 1980s, the amount was really large. So, but of course, you had to cut a few corners with the law. So when he came to ask me whether he could accept this proposal from his friend, he didn't tell me the whole story. He didn't tell me what the whole proposal was. He just said it's a little something. He was a very little superficial in explaining it. Then I asked him a few questions, and then I probed further. And within a short time, I could understand it was not all clean and nice. There were things that obviously were dangerous. They were not right. And I told him, no, I don't think you should do this. I think you'll get into trouble, and it will really bring trouble to you. So I could see his face fell. He was disappointed. He came back the next day. He said, have you thought about it? So I said, yes, I've thought about it. Have you thought about it? He said, yeah, but there's so much money. It's in my whole life, I could never earn this much, even if I worked really hard. And you know what? I've thought about it. I'll give 50% to your temple. So he felt probably that I would be in a dilemma now. But I wasn't in a dilemma. I had a very clear mind about it. I said, look, God doesn't want your money in this way. When you earn it properly, then yes. Then come and say, I'll give, why 50%? Give 90%. Amit was talking about whether the Hindu scriptures speak about giving 10% in charity, and he felt, and rightly, why 10% only? In fact, I was tempted to say that, well, probably the scriptures say you should keep 10% and give 90% in charity. Because actually, fundamentally, our whole philosophy of the Vedas is that nothing belongs to us. It's not our property. It is not our wealth. We are at best custodians. At best, we are trustees. We are holding this wealth in trust for a higher cause, for the service of God and the world. So in any case, so when he came back, and I did not accept his offer, so he was a little disappointed, and he was undergoing a real struggle in the mind. And finally he came back after a few days, and I was beginning to get a little worried. So I followed up, and then finally he said, you know what, I've decided not to accept his offer. And then, later on, the other man went ahead with that scheme, and there was a loud explosion a while later. It took a while. For several months, he was on a roll. He was making lots and lots of money. And he used to taunt this gentleman who was my friend. And he would say, look, you're still living in your one-bedroom apartment in such and such suburb, and look at me. I've got a huge bungalow now. I've got crores and crores. Had you joined in with me, you would have got all this. And he was taunting him, he's saying, they were friendly. So he was taunting him in a friendly way and saying, look where you are. You'll continue like this all your life. Just say Hare Krishna, just be there all your life. So then he came back again because he was naturally disappointed because, he's speaking like this to me. I said, never mind. Now it so happened that a few months later, I don't remember exactly the whole time sequence and how long, because this was in the 80s. So he came and said, this whole thing that's broken out in the newspapers? Yes. I said, that's him, he said. So, who? He said, he's the person who made me the offer, and he's in jail. So I said, really? He said, yes. And what's more, he's been trying a lot to contact me, and I'm not accepting his calls. And then he said, yesterday his wife called me, and she was crying on the phone, and she was saying that, your Hare Krishna saved you. Had my husband listened to you, he wouldn't have done this and he wouldn't have been in jail today. And she told him that my husband is crying all day in jail. He's so despondent and so morose now. And then he said, actually, I was very upset when you didn't say yes to me. But just in order to keep our friendship, I agreed with you. But now I realize that actually, this was the right decision I took. I did not succumb to that temptation. It's an austerity. It is an austerity to have an opportunity to earn this kind of money, and in a society where success is measured in terms of how much money you have, not by how you have earned that money, unfortunately. So therefore, in such a society which has become increasingly and viciously materialistic, to have a person who can resist the temptation for easy money and say no, it is very difficult. So it's a kind of an austerity. And according to the Vedic scriptures, austerity being an important limb or a pillar of dharma should be protected. And the one thing that destroys the limb or the pillar of austerity is intoxication, according to the Vedas, whether it's alcohol or drugs. Because when one experiences intoxication, one is not able to understand what is right and what is wrong. One is not able to discriminate. And therefore, this destroys our sense of discrimination and makes us do things that are wrong. The next pillar of dharma is shaucham, or cleanliness. By cleanliness is meant not just cleanliness of the body, but more importantly, cleanliness of the mind. Pure thoughts, pure actions. You see, pure company leads to pure thoughts. Pure thoughts lead to pure actions. Pure actions lead to good habits. Good habits build character. This is the sequence of things. So having a mind that is well formed, a mind that is focused on something sublime, rather than a mind that is simply possessed by greed and by envy of others who have what I don't have, it is not a peaceful mind. And the one thing that the scriptures say destroys the principle of shaucham or cleanliness is wanton and illicit sexual activity, unnecessary promiscuity, etc. And you'll notice that in this day and age, where there is a lot of money, where the atmosphere around is very materialistic, the kind of promiscuity that we witness, even in a country like India, is quite shocking. We have one of our friends who are lawyers, and they have friends who are divorce lawyers, and the kinds of stories they speak about what's going on. I'm sure you're well more tuned with that world than I am, and you know what's going on everywhere around you. So there is no question of cleanliness internally or even externally when we don't when we don't follow this particular principle. The third one is daya, or mercy or compassion. Amit used the same phrase by speaking about compassionate capitalism. Principally, compassion means to at least not harm others, physically and also in spirit. And the worst form of flouting of the law of compassion is animal slaughter. For I cannot for the life of me understand why it is that people do not get this. When there are innocent, poor animals who also have feelings like you and me, they feel pain like you and me, and we feel no remorse, we have no qualms and no compunctions about mercilessly slaughtering them when there's ample grains and vegetables and fruits and so on available. And the way it happens everywhere, of course now things are a little politicized, that's a different thing, but we are making a philosophical point. How can a society that unleashes such staggering, unbelievable violence on helpless creatures be expected to be a violence-free society? I think it was Pythagoras who said that when we find nothing objectionable in killing animals to eat, we will progressively come to the point of not finding anything objectionable in killing humans as well. Because we develop that violent tendency. In Bhagavad Gita terminology, this is called the Rajasic mind and the Tamasic mind. So businesses in all these areas, businesses that indulge in promoting cruelty to animals, in promoting all sorts of promiscuity, in promoting intoxication, etc., are naturally not within the category of dharmic business. Of course, nowadays there's hardly any business where you're untouched by adharma. That's the way of the modern civilization. But nevertheless, we still have some leeway. We still have some choice. And we can use this choice, this freedom, our will, to determine what kinds of businesses we want to enter into and what kind of businesses we don't want to enter into. And finally, we have satyam. Satyam is truthfulness. Now, truthfulness, we have an ordinary conception of truthfulness, which is that I should not speak a lie to you, which is naturally also an element of truthfulness. But the word satyam in this context has a wider connotation. It means that you don't lie to your customers, which means that you don't overly glorify your own products when you know it's not true, that you don't indulge in enterprises which are cheating in nature, and you don't even indulge in business enterprises which are, shall we say, very, very greed-oriented. There are many types of business activities where there is a lure of quick money and the lure of very large quantities of money. And naturally, they are very high-risk businesses. So therefore, from the dharmic perspective, when people ask us, should I do this business? Should I do that business? Should I invest in shares? What should I do with my money? So our answer is usually, keep the principle in mind. Anything for which you want something out of nothing. You want a lot with a very little time frame. You want a lot with very little work. That's not dharmic. You have to be willing to work reasonably hard and within the laws of dharma. Therefore, all sorts of speculative activity is not considered dharmic. Where it's like gambling. In as much as gambling is not a dharmic activity, there are many types of business activities, and you are more well versed in that than I am. And you can use this yardstick to judge whether something is dharmic from the satyam point of view or not. Any kind of business that is like gambling, which wants very quick results, is in the category of adharmic business. Most certainly, every form of business has a risk associated with it, undoubtedly. There is no business that has zero risk. So we are not saying that there should be zero risk. But the point is, when the risk is exceptionally high, when the returns are exceptionally high, and the work required or the time frames required are very low, and when they cross the ethical boundaries, such businesses are also considered in violation of the principles of satyam. In fact, even advertising today has become like that. Advertising violates all the 4 principles of dharma today. For example, they will show scantily dressed ladies to advertise a product that has no connection to that lady. For example. This is just one common example. There is some famous marketing guru, many years ago, I remember reading this, who said that marketing is all about creating a need where none exists. So people are happy to live simply without your product. They're happy enough, but you're not happy. You want them to buy your product. So you will advertise your product in such a way that they will be tempted to buy. So we are dangling so many temptations in the front of the consumer. So we have all these different shopping malls and everything which are tantalizing and bewildering array of products. And when you go in, you can't come out without buying something that you didn't really need in the first place. So this whole blind consumerist culture of wanting more and more and more and more is an endless trap. So are we also perpetuating that? Are we also aggravating that? That is a question we have to examine if we are running a business. So therefore, tapaha, shaucham, daya, satyam. These are the 4 pillars of dharma. And in as much as dharma is applicable for our personal life, for political life, for social life, it's also applicable for business. So if we apply these yardsticks in our life, our dharma, our business will be sustainable, it will be just, it will be equitable, and it will actually generate wealth productively for the welfare of the world, which is what business is meant to do in the first place. This is dharmic business. There is no bar against business or economic activity. One can be fully spiritual, fully dharmic, and be an entrepreneur, and earn a lot of money, and even become very wealthy as well. But one must also know what consciousness to work in to earn that wealth, what to do and what not to do to earn that wealth, and what consciousness to have when one gets that wealth. Does one think oneself to be the proprietor of that wealth? And finally, how does one spend that wealth? These are the questions that distinguish dharmic business from adharmic business. So these are a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you. I thank you very much for your patient and kind attention. I heartily thank the Artha Forum for conducting these programs on a regular basis. I thank Gauranga Prabhu for having invited me to come here and speak to all of you and share my thoughts. I do hope that the words I have spoken have served as some food for thought for all of you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Your Holiness, for your very enlightening words. And truly, we understood from the Indian Vedic perspective how to bring dharma into our business lives. And with that, I will now quickly ask our founders of the Artha Forum the reason why we are here. We have two young gentlemen who I'd like to introduce. Rajiv Shrivastav, he is the founder and managing partner of the Basil Fund. Rajiv has had more than 23 years of global operating and investing experience in the US, Asia, and Europe. And with him we have Sanjeev Maheshwari, who is the CFO of Basil Partners. And together they have founded Artha Forum because they passionately feel that they want to spread the message, the Vedic message, among the youth and to use it for a more meaningful society and business. So I request Rajiv and Sanjeev to please come on stage. Perhaps Rajiv can first speak a few words on Artha Forum and everything it stands for. And Sanjeev can moderate the questions for His Holiness. Thank you. You can climb up from there.
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for the very enlightening lecture. In fact, when Amit and Sunil were sitting here, I don't know, Amit has left, probably Sunil is here. So I was also thinking that, my association with Maharaj goes back almost 30 years. So we have studied together and I have seen his sort of transformation from, the educational field to a very successful, I would say, executive to, then adopting the spiritual path. So he's been an inspiration for a lot of us over, this period of time. And, we have a few of our colleagues who have studied together with Maharaj who are here today. And we obviously don't get so much of time because he travels so widely. But whenever we also have some dilemmas, like whether Rajiv or me, we would always like to consult him and take his views. And it has been really very helpful.
But I want to clarify that they were not the ones who approached me with that problem.
So Maharaj, I have one question before, we can have a few more questions from the audience because there are a lot of youngsters here I see. And, in today's scenario where it's sort of a startup culture, every second person we come across, every, individual we meet, everybody wants to actually get into some business or some venture. And I think, some of them obviously have some great ideas, they want to contribute, but a lot of the youngsters are there to really, make quick money, and it is all being fueled by what they see in newspapers, what they see globally, internationally, that, billions of dollars are being created through, these technology startups. And I think somewhere down the line, we also see a lot of these youngsters sort of losing, the sort of, I would say, ambition and probably going in different directions and losing money, and then, things go in a different direction. So, at such a young age when people start off and make so much of money, how do they actually ethically, because, there's no training to these people either in colleges or maybe at homes in terms of, contributing or, putting something aside or doing something socially? How do they actually learn about these things and then contribute in a more meaningful manner? Because, they are not really being trained for it. And they're just being driven by maybe, what they see and, the opportunity which is existing today.
I think Amit also made a similar point in his talk. It's all really a question of the company one keeps. Not the company you work in, I mean. The company you keep in terms of your circle, your social circle, your friends, and so on. You've heard the Hindi saying, Jaisa sang vaisa rang. Association rubs off. Mentalities rub off. And when we keep company with people who have a certain mindset, before long, it rubs off on us. So to keep company with people who are down to earth, sober-minded, focused, who understand principles of Dharma reasonably well, who are implementing it in their life, that's the kind of company that we need, first and foremost. The biggest issue or the problem of this age is this company. The atmosphere all around us is saturated with negativity and activities that break the four pillars of Dharma. And it has become the norm. So when you are trying to live a dharmic life, you're actually, strangely enough, flowing against the current of the world. But if a sufficient number of people flow in that direction and you're keeping company with them, then you get enough strength to actually make that journey. And despite the challenges that come along the way, because of the strength of that company, then we can actually negotiate these turbulent periods and events in our life and the temptations and still go ahead very smoothly.
Thank you, Maharaj. I think since we are running short of time, we would request the audience, if somebody has some questions, open it up. Okay.
Hi Krishna Maharaj, please accept my obeisances. Of lately, I haven't been aware about gambling so much because since childhood, a lot of us have been told that gambling is wrong. And as we are also moving towards the modern age, I wanted to understand from gamblers their definition of gambling versus our definition of gambling, because unfortunately, it's really different. I'm talking about businesses that are coming parallelly, legally in other countries and which are also coming in India, like sniping, betting, in terms of sports, in movies, in that field. It's legal abroad, like the bet fairs and everything. So when Indians are asked about gambling, it's on their religious principles. They come up with examples like it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of risk, and businesses first principle, higher the risk, higher the profit. And if it is legal there, it's just a matter of time that it's going to be legal in India. I spoke to some important ministers in the sports federation and people who are investing. So for them, they said gambling is a part of our business. And I mean, when you talk about the regulative principles, dharma, it's not just far from that, but it is also a part of, they're taught how to do it. We're taught in our business schools how to work in the stock market. We're taught about shares. We're taught about the dealing in the open market. So when we come back home, when we're thinking, the definition of the real open market versus sports market versus industries that are parallelly working, which are also working towards getting legalized, is very different from our perception of gambling. For us, we think just going to the casino or, not being truthful about it, or speculation is gambling. But this is a different line altogether. What do you understand by that, and what should we understand by that?
Thank you. Betting.
Sniping.
Sniping. What is sniping? I'm sorry, you pardon my ignorance. It's a form of betting?
So sniping is when there's something being telecasted, and there's a frequency, there's a duration, which is different when a match is being played. There are people at the match, at the stadium, who already give the real...
So it's like a betting. It's like a form of betting.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
The bet fairs and all of that.
Yes. So your question is that what if it becomes legal? It has become. Okay. Pardon my ignorance. I'm not much into betting these days. But let me point out that legal validity is not necessarily an indication of the dharmic or adharmic quality of something. The fact that somebody or something is a law or is legally permissible does not make a particular act that is otherwise adharmic, dharmic. So an adharmic act will be adharmic even if the parliament passes a law that this is okay, it's legal. So we must distinguish between what is legal and what is dharmic. We should stick to what is dharmic, and in terms of other activities which may be allowed by law, but because we consider them to be not dharmic, we don't accept them. So betting and sniping or such activities are definitely a form of gambling. And they definitely, and I know for certain of how many people have created havoc in their lives. Families have been destroyed by variants of gambling. And personally, I know several people who've had this problem for people who are close to them. So yes, definitely betting, sniping, and horse racing, all of these things are variations of the same theme. You see, it's all driven by extreme materialistic ambitions. It's driven by a complete ignorance of what life is meant for. And when you're gambling, you're completely obsessed with that, 24 hours a day. You're just there. And even those who do arbitrage, and you do foreign exchange arbitrage, for those of you know how obsessive it becomes. You have to be on the screen. Those who deal in certain things all day long, they're just there on the screen. They can't sleep at night. And especially now with the whole world becoming, one market, so to speak, there's no sleep. And at times it sucks you in to such a degree that there is no conception left of dharma, adharma. You're just totally preoccupied that you have to make that profit. You have to make that good deal. It destroys your peace of mind. It destroys any semblance of spiritual consciousness that may be there. So all these 4 activities that I mentioned, gambling is there, there is illicit sexual activity, there is various forms of intoxication, you see, forms of animal slaughter. They're all very destructive for our peace of mind and for our consciousness and for the overall well-being of the society.
Good evening, Guruji. This is Sunil Dhawan here. I would like to share, my experience about dharma in business. I was part of Aditya Birla Group, and I used to travel to China a lot in first around 2000 to 2005. And when I used to travel to China, we used to hear a lot that a lot of non-performing assets are happening in China during that period. Extraordinarily, 7%, 10% of the total borrowings were having in non-performing assets. And we used to be proud enough being an Indian, and we used to say that in India, the non-performing assets is very low, approximately 2 to 3% during that period in business. Now, over a period of time, the deterioration which has happened has gone to such a level that today in India, we are talking about 20% of non-performing assets. So in some form or the other, the dharma and the business, the imbalance has happened, because of which this deterioration is going forward. I do not know to what level this will go forward, but such kind of initiatives will definitely help in ensuring that there is a balance between the business and the dharma, so that at least that can be taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Guruji, you spoke about duality in terms of dharma and adharma. In a country like India, where we have multiplicity of thought, and where we talk about ekam sat vipta bahuda vadanti, and is the lack of dharmic principles following, does that mean there's a dharma there? Is there a negativity there just because there's no dharma out there? Or is the adharma an opposite of dharma? That means it's bad and good. Is it a sheer form of duality, or it's something more?
Well, Dharma, as I mentioned, has these pillars, and where people respect these injunctions and follow them, there is Dharma, and human society will flourish. Where these principles are not followed, and to the degree they are not followed, and in the manner in which they are not followed, there will be deleterious or harmful consequences. Animal slaughter, for example, is an act that yields terrible reactions, karmic reactions. We cannot be immune from the reactions of our actions. By the laws of nature, they will happen. Similarly, the large numbers of children killed in the womb, who are even more helpless than the animals that are being killed. Astounding number of children are being killed in the womb, all over the world and even in India. It's going to generate its reactions. And therefore, you're going to see situations where people are slaughtered in large numbers and die horrible deaths. Because we are generating such violence, it has to come back to us. The violence will return to us in various ways, in crime, as terrorism, as natural disasters, and so on and so forth. But everything that goes as we sow, so shall we reap. The reactions will come. So it behooves us, as people who want to live a happy life, to follow the principles of Dharma, have a peaceful life, and help others also to live a similar life. And in our country especially, it is known as a land of Dharma, but is fast becoming a land of Adharma also, due to also lack of clear understanding of what constitutes Dharma and what doesn't. This is not a sectarian concept, by the way. It's a very universal concept. Okay? I think this.
Yeah, one more question.
Maharaj, I think a lot of time in the corporate world, I think there are conflicting challenges between management and shareholders and etc. as to, how much profit is good profit, what's the difference between profit and profiteering, where one should draw the line. Any reflections and advice on that?
Thank you. The first and most important thing is, what is the consciousness of the people who are going to make these decisions? That's the crux of the matter. Who is responsible for actions that will generate the profit? And what are their mindsets? To what degree are they making their policies with respect to Dharma in their business? I quote this example very often. It's a little subtle, but it will drive home the point. One of our acquaintances, a very dear friend, he was mentioning many years ago that he met the marketing director for Asia of a particular company that produces consumer goods. And there were edible items. And so this lady, who happened to meet him at some conference, she told him, our marketing plan for India, our marketing plan for India is to make Indians stop eating hot food at home. Because then we can sell what we want to sell. So they will sell their items for breakfast or whatever else. And in order to sell that, they want to uproot a whole culture. See, it's not a small thing. A family staying together, cooking food together, eating hot food is a very important cultural element. It's not as ordinary as it may sound initially. It has to do with the fundamentals of the culture of the land. The family is the social unit, the basic social unit. And if that is not preserved, you will have a society crumbling. Therefore, today you will have people walking on the street eating. It's happening in the West, I see it happening now, where nobody cooks at home. There's no family spirit is broken down. It's only processed, pre-processed foods. Put it in the microwave, take it out from the freezer, eat it. That whole love that is there in cooking, in serving, it's lost. So it's actually this whole idea that I want my company to make profits and sell my products. And for this purpose, I will have to change the culture, destroy the culture of a particular land, didn't seem to cause that lady any problems in her mind. So this is the way that the modern society, the materialistic society, is engendering and fostering such mentalities, exploitative mentalities. Profit at any cost. We don't consider what the other stakeholders have, and the customer is a very important stakeholder. The society at large is a very important stakeholder. There is no harm in making good profits, provided they have been done in a dharmic way. And provided, even if the profits are large, we know how to share our profits. The sharing of profits is done by a person who understands that this is not my property. This is actually God's property. I'm the custodian, and I will share it. This is our philosophy of our country. So if the mindset of people in decision-making positions is dharmic, then the decisions that they make will also be dharmic. Then these dilemmas, these conundrums, as delicate as they may be, it will be much easier to solve them.
Thank you.
Yes.
I would now like to conclude by asking Rajiv to say a few words, and then we will have the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Maharaj, once again for coming and speaking at the Artha event here in Mumbai. Maharaj has been a speaker at our events both in Singapore a few times. He's also spoken at the Eco Village. I'll just very briefly share that, as Maharaj said earlier, that unless we, have more satsang of people who are like-minded, who think in a similar way. So the Artha Forum has had events at various parts in the world. We've had several events in Silicon Valley. We've had several events in, in Mumbai, Singapore, Dubai, and London. And we are now seeing a big network of entrepreneurs who are, thinking about compassionate capitalism. In fact, at the World Economic Forum, which announced just a few months ago, that the current capitalism, which is greed-based capitalism, is not really failing, but practically everybody is agreeing that it has failed, because 2 years ago there were 81 people who had more wealth than the bottom 3.6 billion population. And just the latest report at the from Oxfam at World Economic Forum, Davos, said that right now there are 8 people. So just 8 people have more wealth than the bottom 3.6 billion. In India, there are 57 people who have more wealth than the bottom 70% of India's, that means over 700 million people. So, greed-based capitalism, which tries to project itself as this is the only way. Communism failed, socialism also is not working, but greed-based capitalism is creating such a lot of inequality. And that's why, we are trying to have these forums at different parts in the world, simply to, to make people realize that there is another way, based on knowledge from the Vedic scriptures. There are other ways of doing economic activity. And as Maharaj said, if we follow the pillars of Dharma, then and our consciousness is different. And so you will see that at all our Artha Forum events, you will have some people like Amit Chandra, who's on the board of Tata Sons, a great practicing, compassionate capitalist, and a spiritual person like Maharaj speaking. That has brought about a significant change of hearts. I'm happy to state that just 2 months ago, I got a message from one, he would not like me to name him, but this entrepreneur who started a new business. His earlier business, he grew and sold it for 150 million. And in this new business that he started, he said that he's come to a lot of the Artha Forum events in Silicon Valley, and he has decided, he and his wife, that 90% of the shares that he owns in this new company, he is dedicating it to to charity. And there's another entrepreneur in Denver who's done well in his earlier venture, says, look, I've made enough, and now this new venture, I'm dedicating 75% of my wealth to charity. So we are very happy that the message which Maharaj is able to, and spiritual leaders are able to give to the audience of entrepreneurs, comes from the heart. And this combination of people from the business field and the leaders in spirituality, when they speak, it touches and it is changing people's hearts. We are grateful to all of you for coming, and we hope that once a year, I've requested Gaurang Prabhu, once a year we should still host an Artha Forum event at Govardhan Eco Village, where all of you can see many entrepreneurs from different parts of the world coming, and you will see how their hearts are changing, and by practicing compassionate capitalism, actually they are doing well, and they're all they're constantly taking guidance from scriptures, from the sadhus, and trying to find that real balance in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv, Sanjeev, and His Holiness. Thank you so much. And with that, a short vote of thanks for everyone who's worked so hard for this program. To begin with, the Gowani family, who have given us this Learning Galaxy space to host this program today. Then the Urmi management team, under the leadership of Mr. Surinder Singh, for all the arrangements. Today's dinner, we thank Govinda's Restaurant. We thank Radha Gopinath Media Services for everything they've provided us today. We thank all the Artha volunteers who've been here working overtime to make sure this event is a success. And finally, we thank the speakers for having taken out their precious, valuable time, Mr. Amit Chandra, Sunil Sanghai, and His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrit Swami. Thank you so much. And of course, our founders, Rajiv, Sanjeev, and all of you who've been such a patient audience. We've started late, we've ended late, but you've been with us from the beginning till the end. Thank you so much. We really value your presence, and we hope to see you for all our other Artha events. Thank you. Do join us for dinner, and good night to all of you. Goodbye.